Hello and welcome back to the Happy Running Podcast. I'm Drew and I'm here with my buddy Tony G. We
Yeah,
are endurance athletes talking about all things running, racing, Ironman, any sort of endurance sports topic. So today we wanted to talk about three main things that you can do to prepare for your next race, whether it's a marathon or a 5K or a 10K, or it's an Ironman or a half Ironman. And both of us have had some recent race experience. I recently ran the Berlin Marathon, and I ran a PB at 226, at 228. Oh, geez, 226. Getting ahead of myself.
come on now.
Hopefully the next one. But yeah, I ran like 228 high, which was a good day for me in Berlin. Tony, what was your recent race experience?
Oh, yeah. Recently, it was actually last week. Yeah, about a week ago.
One week.
Last
Yeah,
Sunday. Yeah. I ran Ironman, California, and though I PR'd, at 12 hours and 18 minutes, it wasn't what I was hoping for, but still a good experience as always.
that's awesome. Yeah, and I think kind of contrasting experiences in some ways. Like, Tony seemed like he had a little bit of a tough race. I actually mentally had a little bit of a tough race, despite it working out pretty well for me throughout the race. So I think Tony, you ended up with a great time compared to your past times, right?
Yeah. I mean, the ironic part of it is, if you talk, like we were having this conversation before, if you talk to somebody outside of the endurance area, what have you, and how we're so kind of A-type personality, when I tell them my race wasn't great, it wasn't kind of what I had hoped for, and then at the very end, they're like, "What was the time?" Well, I kind of PR'd. It's the fastest time I've ever ran an Ironman before. And they're like, "Wait, what? What? I thought you said I had a bad race." But it's all kind of relative, right? I mean, you're kind of training up to your event, and if you're really kind of tracking your training, you're tracking your performance, you're doing your FTPs to see where you're at. You're doing those types of sort of tests. You can get a pretty good gauge on what you're capable of doing on race day in ideal conditions. And
Yeah.
I emphasize ideal conditions. And in this case, there were some issues there, but at the end of the day, it was a PR. So I can't complain, but I do. It's
Yeah.
just
Well,
who we
congrats.
are.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
always figure out a way to complain about it. Something went wrong. Well, but that's kind of a good segue into the final topic that we want to talk about. But there's three main things that we wanted to discuss that we were thinking about and learning from our recent race experiences. Uh, Mental kind of comes toward the end of this, but starting from the beginning, the whole nothing new on race day, practice and training what you plan to execute on your race. There are a few things that I think we both have learned there. First one, I would say nutrition is something
Mm.
that is huge. Most people can struggle with nutrition either in running or in a multi-sport race like triathlon. So one of the things that I've been trying to do a lot more is really closely track my nutrition in training. I use Strava as my main like training diary, if you will. I like to track how many grams of carbs I've consumed on mostly long runs. The midweek runs, like workouts, I don't track it, but I'll still consume fuel. So grams of carbs, milligrams of sodium, or grams, depending on the quantity, and then your fluids. For me as a runner, that's been really important. Tony, could you tell me a little bit about what you do for Ironman and triathlon?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for so long. I got a good handle of what I want to be sort of taking in as far as fluids go and fuel. And it's really going to depend a little. There's a little variation on the fluids, really depending on where the course is. Is it very humid? Is it not so sort of humid? How fast am I going to go? So for me, I'm more focused on one, making sure the fuel that I'm using during training and the hydration I'm using during training is the same that I'm going to be using on the race. And I know there's always going to be stuff out there, on the course And then, there may be times where I might have to actually kind of dip into that. So I also want to make sure that I understand how my body will respond to those things because I think that's super key. And for all of the triathletes, when they're doing these Ironman events, we are sucking down a lot of fuel, usually a lot of gels. So it's important also to understand well, first you have to exercise your gut to get used to this stuff, and then kind of making sure that your gut's able to actually handle it and sort of process it right. I mean, because
Yeah.
if you're not, I mean, you're just going to sort of throw it up, and you're really not going to. So there's a lot of that goes into the training to ensure that your body can handle the amount of fluids and kind of carbs you're putting in your body.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think a thing that a lot of people don't anticipate is how the intensity of their training will kind of dictate how your gut reacts. And
Exactly.
for me, I've struggled. My gut has kind of been a weakness in the past, so I've been focusing a lot on just kind of overloading my system during training. And the way I've kind of put it to people, it's a lot better to shit yourself on a long run in
Yeah.
training and where you're close to home or whatever, than to do that in a race, which almost happened to me, Boston 2023. I almost was
Wow.
the guy who shit himself, but luckily, I'm forgetting the dude's name, but Instagram guy uh, got kind of semi-famous for doing that at the end of the Boston race.
Yeah. Funny. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it,
It's also like with my gut. It's I also I mean almost never is my gut going to be able to handle. I mean on a half Ironman it's usually fine, but on a full it's always gonna react in a negative way at some sort of point. And it's also for me it's important to know I've done enough of them. I know how it feels it, it's going to pass. It's going to pass in about X amount of time, what have you. Or, hey, I've never felt this before. Uh-oh, something's not right. So a lot of
yeah,
times you understand what those feelings are, what your body's telling you, and you can read the signs.
yeah, because of what you're doing in training, exactly. So
In
that's an
training, yeah.
awesome point. Like getting used to what you're doing, you know what it feels like, you know the quantities. It's measurable. It's the exact brand that you're going to be using in the race, and the exact form of that brand. So if you're using Morton gels in training, make sure the Morton gel is what you're consuming in the race, not the drink mix or vice versa. Um, but I have California International Marathon coming up. I'm going to be shifting to precision fuel and hydration, which you
Mhm.
actually, Tony, I think you're a big proponent of.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah.
got also some other friends who've told me about it. So that's their full encore sponsor at CIM. I don't want to have the logistical problems of carrying a bunch of stuff with me in my pockets or a belt or something. So I like to pack light. I'll try it out over the next few weeks, and hopefully it works out well. So,
No, that's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah, shoots. Maybe I should do that marathon, man. I've never had a course where they've had that on, at the aid stations yet. That's awesome.
Yeah, actually, so this isn't like sponsorship or anything, but a lot of people have told me a benefit of precision fuel and hydration is the high sodium content, which I've struggled with
Oh
because
yeah.
like Morton, most people use Morton. There's virtually zero sodium in that. Like Morton 160 has 160 milligrams of sodium, I believe, in one packet. That's 40 grams of carbs, 160. If you multiply that by how many you'd need in a race, maybe 4 or 5 of those in a marathon, uh, 4 or 5 times 160. That's probably not enough for a lot of people, especially if you add in
Mhm.
humid conditions, like you said,
Yep.
or other things that would require more fuel and more sodium. So, big benefit of some of the different brands is how's your stomach going to handle the sodium content, and if you can handle more, usually more is better, depending on the person.
Yeah, the sodium was a big one. Like for me, I think that's why I adjusted because as I started getting older, I started cramping a little bit more, and that's why I got kind of turned on to that one. And one, you got the sodium in there, but it also got a lot of people. have a hard time with certain flavors and the way it's sort of tasting and what have you. And I really like the mild sort of taste to those as well. It just I was able to handle it better.
Awesome. Well, I've got my first pack coming in the mail this week,
Nice,
so I'll let you know
nice.
how it goes. Yeah, and so a couple things with nutrition. The like I said before, the intensity dictates how your body's going to respond to dumping more calories in your system. The uh, the conditions of the race. So if it's hot and humid, it's going to dictate how much sodium you need, even how many carbs, how much fluid you need to take in versus a cooler, maybe a dry day, and making sure that when you're training, you're understanding how your body's reacting in certain conditions
Mm,
and how the race conditions will be so that you don't end up if you have a hot and humid race like even Chicago this year was slightly humid. I think it was like 80% humidity or maybe even more, but it was not that hot. It was like 60 low 60s,
okay.
but I know people who had issues with that because they were training up in the mountains and it was 50 degrees and dry their entire
Yeah.
training block. So that's something I feel like can be huge as well.
Yeah, once again, that the precision fuel and the hydration, they have a little. I thought it's kind of cool. It's not like so perfect, but they have a little sort of questionnaire that you go through that'll help kind of map out your fuel and the hydration depending on what the intensity is that you're going to go. Is it going to be super humid? Is it not going to be? What have you? What race it is, and are you a sweater? Are you not? Do you cramp? It takes all those sort of factors in there and kind of gives you a high level sort of fuel and hydration plan, which I thought was kind of cool too.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, well, impromptu ad for Precision Fuel and Hydration.
Yeah,
Sponsor me.
yeah, yeah, right.
Cool. Yeah, so that's, I mean, uh, practicing in training what you're going to do on race day. I think that's huge. Also, I guess like what's the course profile? What are the conditions
Mm.
on race day? That type of thing. So being able to practice those things in training. If you have a hilly race, Tony, how was Sacramento? Was it hilly? Were you prepared for that? How were the weather conditions?
Yeah, Sacramento, super flat. It's a PR, Ironman event. The swim course, I knew that there was going to be a down current swim, so it was going to be fast. I was almost positively going to set a PR on how fast I swam, and I actually did. It was really quick. It was like super fast, where I was, you could have just sort of floated down and made the cutoff. The bike was super flat as well. I think one of the things I didn't realize there was certain patches of it where the road was a little choppy and what have you, and I probably should have looked into that a little bit more. But it didn't. I didn't think there was going to be a lot of wins, but I should have looked back at the previous years. There was a good amount of wins kind of on the bike as I picked up in the afternoon, and I think that's what kind of threw me off a little bit. So I was off a little bit on my bike time, but and then the run was super flat. But if it ever is something hilly and what have you, I definitely I mean here in California we got a lot of hills that we can work on and what have you. If you don't, a lot of people will just kind of get on like a Wahoo trainer or something. If they have a, Zwift on there, they'll just kind of put it in a higher gear or whatever, and just kind of crank, what
Yeah.
have you. But yeah, you got to be able to, figure out ways to be able to sort of simulate, what it's going to be like on the actual course itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my experience I was Berlin was pancake flat most of the time. Uh, there was a slight wind. I think like wind and hills can definitely throw people off. Um, the overall my conditions I can't complain about though. It was pretty ideal. It was cold, pretty cold in the morning, but at like the actual start time, about 9 o'clock, it was probably like 42 degrees Fahrenheit. It was at probably like 8 degrees Celsius, something like that. So, um, pretty ideal. Low winds. It was like 8 to 10 miles an hour the whole time, but we were doing somewhat of a loop, so it kind of
So,
seemed to average out a little bit. And so yeah, I feel like we also kind of skipped over a couple specifics. Tony, I want to talk specifics about how many grams of carbs triathletes take in. How much fuel do you often take in? And is there like
Mm.
an hourly mark, or like how do you usually track that just for a reference
Yeah,
point for people?
yeah. Kind of usually the main thing for me is on the bike, and it's I try to have about maybe 90 grams. So I'm taking like probably three gels, every 20 minutes or so, because I'm usually at a fairly high intensity there. So yeah, I mean, if I can handle that, what some people like to do, they like to load up a little bit in the first sort of few hours, and then they kind of taper off a bit.
Yeah.
Kind of like to stay a little bit more consistent. Usually I'll have probably a 32 ounce bottle every hour of the precision fuel. It kind of varies. Sometimes I'll take the 1500. So it's their highest level of sodium in that. But for this one, because it wasn't as sort of humid, it was more kind of mild weather. I took the 1000, every hour. The hardest part, really is, where do you fit it all, right? I mean, you're on a bike, if you think about it, I'm 5.5 hours or so, right, of sort of riding a bike. So that's 5 times 3, that's 15 sort of, kind of close to 15 gels. So a lot of it is, logistically, where do you put it and what have you. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's usually what I do. And then when I come on usually for, triathletes, after you get off the bike, you do not want to take any more damn gels. You are just sick and tired of putting that down. So you start looking at, what else do you take? So I will take like salt, salt tablets and stuff.
Okay.
When I start to run, like every sort of 20 minutes for a little bit, and then then it kind of gets longer as the time goes on. And then usually I'll just have some water or something. And on the actual course itself, usually there's some different gels, or there's some bananas or some other things that I usually will take there, and that's how I sort of finish off the marathon.
Okay. Yeah, some of the figures I've seen, and I think triathletes and runners often share data and things like that. If you go, online and read about this type of thing, endurance athletes talk about what's the optimal amount of fuel to take in versus per sport. Generally with lower intensity. So I don't know if this is accurate. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, but like the relative lower relative intensity of cycling, you can tend to take a lot more in than, like you said, you feel
Yeah.
queasy when you're running. So like for me, a good baseline has been about 60 grams of carbs per hour. So that for me, that's I've been doing Morton 160s, so that's 40 grams of carbs in a gel.
Mm,
So I try and do about one and a half of those
mm,
per hour, but sometimes that'll be a gel and then like a half a bottle. Or I'll
yep.
do sometimes I'll start a marathon with a bottle and then I'll toss that. So that'll be 40 grams of carbs before I get to like 40 minutes, and then I start
Mm,
hitting gels at that point and whatever drinks on the course. For a lot of people, what I've read is that somewhere between 40 and 60 grams of carbs per hour is optimal for runners. And then triathletes, you kind of get into the 60 to 100 grams. And
yeah,
I've seen
exactly.
people even like, yeah, so like ultra marathoners, same thing. Ultra marathoners, triathletes all talk about this. Some ultra marathoners will take in like 120 grams of carbs
If you can
because
take
of
it, yes, yeah,
the lower relative intensity, right? So
yeah,
it's pretty wild how high you can go.
yeah. If you can do that, man, it's so hard. I mean, I have no problem sucking down that stuff on a half Ironman. The full Ironmans, it just for my stomach, it gets a little challenging, and that's where I'll usually get to a low point a little bit, and I know I
Yeah.
need to take more. So it's really a balance of how much you do take. And Drew, you don't on your marathons. I mean, you don't kind of carry anything, right? I mean, you don't carry like a bottle or anything like that, do you?
I personally don't. Like I said, I'll start with a bottle, so I'll like
You,
buy a like a Gatorade bottle with a sippy top or something, or I'll
mm,
get some of those dollar store bottles like for ketchup, and I'll fill that up with some fluid. and then I'll toss that usually around like 7K or 8K,
Ah,
and
okay,
then I start doing gels. But like depending on the marathon, if you don't like what they have on course, you might be forced to carry
right,
stuff with you. And a lot
yeah,
of people like at as my marathons have progressed, when I started 5 years ago marathoning, my first marathon was CIM, so I'll be back for my fifth anniversary. Um,
nice,
I ran 3:29 and change for that, so just under 3:30, which is 8 minutes a mile. Now compared to under 5:40 per mile, so it's like 5:37, 5:39 or something was my average pace for Berlin. So as that intensity goes up, my ability to take in fuel and what I could take has
yeah,
changed a lot. But at the beginning, I was taking mostly like solid, chewable jelly gummy things.
hmm. Okay, okay, yeah,
Mishmash of words. I don't know what to call them, but the solids. I would take those because of the lower relative intensity. As I've increased, anytime I can get my hands on fluid with carbs in it is so
hmm,
much easier for me to stomach than taking a 40-gram gel, shoving that down my throat, and then trying to find some water to wash it down, which can really
yeah,
cause you to be a little bit more queasy if depending on the person.
yeah. Well, that was also a good point to mention. I didn't kind of mention it before. Yeah, it's always a combo. Anytime you suck down a gel or anything, always take the water. I mean, not only does it kind of go down better, but it also helps the body be able to absorb it a lot more efficiently as well. I think people make that
Absolutely.
mistake sometimes.
Yeah, and so to wrap up this topic, I mean, generally that's those are some good baselines that we've covered for carbs. That's probably the biggest variable for most people. Salt totally depends on the individual. Some people don't need very much salt at all. Some people need like 2,000, 2 grams uh, for a brief like couple hour period. So I find myself kind of in the middle of that group. I don't know that we need to cover it too much, but Tony, like, what are your thoughts really briefly on salt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really varies, right? Like I was saying, as I got older, I kind of realized I was cramping more. I mean, I take the highest amount of salt packets that the precision fuel and hydration has. You really have to play with it, right? I mean, if you're coming back, from a race and you look at your actual tri suit and it's half white, you got kind of white lightning streaks all over the place. More than
Yeah.
likely, you're probably going to have to take more salt. So I think it's kind of a trial and error thing. Over the years, I just kind of found out that I needed to take a good amount. So I think it's basically what you said. It's a variation. Really depends, and you have to get out there and just try it, see how your body feels with it.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, and I feel like a good rule of thumb for people if they're wondering about how much salt they should take, like that was a great point. Take off your hat when you're done running. Look at the hat. If there's salt on it, you probably are a salty sweater. I think most people will know that. And as a rule of thumb, start with adding more salt and like anything else, like progressive overload. When it comes to endurance training, resistance training, you're just gonna progressively overload your stomach. So start with a little bit more, take more every day that you train or that you're doing a workout, and just see where it goes and find where that point is where you start feeling
No
either
problem.
sick or overly thirsty or whatever, and your body will usually give you an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of moving on to our next point is like with logistics, travel, things like that. A lot of people will be, if you're doing a big race, there are lots of logistical things that you have to figure out in planning. Those things can drastically alter the course of your race. So, Tony, from an Ironman perspective, from triathlon perspective, was there anything that you learned from your last race that you that's relative to that?
Oh man, every time I always learn sort of something. But I mean, just from all the races, and it shouldn't be stressful. But I've done so many of them. I'm stressed, man, because I know I'm always going to forget something. But I mean, I document a list of everything that I'm going to need for the swim, for the bike, for the run. You have to take into consideration, what are you going to eat the, morning of, right? Because you have to get in at least 500 to 600 kind of calories or something like before you actually start. It's going to be a long sort of day. So what are you going to eat there? How's your body going to feel to that? Making sure you got all the sort of try stuff. I'm trying to think if I learned anything. I think it's the same stuff, over and over again. I just want to make sure that I'm, prepared more on the bike, right? Because everything else you can kind of, the run you can kind of sort of figure something out. But with the bike, if you get a flat or whatever, you want to make sure you got a tube, you
Yeah.
got these things, the stuff, the C2 cartridges and what have you. I think those are kind of the important things, kind of making sure that when you are actually on the course, you can fit all your nutrition into certain areas. How are you going to plan that out? So there's a lot of planning, before, during, and after the race that you have to take into consideration. And I know I didn't
Yeah.
kind of totally answer your question, but
No,
it's really a
you
lot.
actually made me think of something really good. That's a great point that I think is universal, is writing everything down
Mm.
and making sure you have a proper checklist. So for some people, if you're not like a anal retentive or whatever that term is person, uh, like type A would be my personality. I have to write things down because that's just how I plan, and that includes not just the day of your race or the day before your race where you're writing down how many gels you're going to take and when you're going to take them. Like I scribble stuff on my arm. I write, all my things on my hand that I need to remember, my pacing at 5K, at 15K, what am I going to be at? But also, before you travel, write all those things down, have a proper race plan, and make sure you got everything to go execute on the race.
Well, you were talking, I think we were talking about this before. I mean, a lot of it also is, depending on the distance that you have to travel and what are the means of transportation for you to get there, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
you're going to be traveling thousands of miles away, you're hopping on a plane, for like, for us, it's okay. Well, how do you, how are you going to get your bike over there, right? I mean, there are beautiful services that you just drop your bike off at one of the local tri shops and they'll kind of ship it there. You go there and then when you get there, it's already there. You just kind of pick it up and then you drop it off with them and they put it back. You got that stuff. But if you're going to do that, you got to make sure, when you have to drop it off, where is the area for you to pick it up, to be able to drop it back off again. So there's a lot of extra things there. If you're gonna, ship it on a plane, what's the cost? Are they going to actually sort of take it? How do they need it? How do you have to box it up? And so a lot of stuff you have to worry about on that side. And of
Yeah,
course, you were
absolutely.
saying, yeah, where was your last one? Berlin. What was the
Yeah.
time difference there, my friend? And how did you adjust to that?
Good segue, Tony. You're a pro. This is exactly. This is like the hardest thing for me for the whole my entire race experience was acclimating to the time difference. And I've seen a lot of like podcasts and things where people talk about how to acclimate. The best thing you can do is give yourself enough time. You can do all the tricks in the book. You can take like melatonin or whatever. Me personally, I don't drink caffeine or alcohol or anything anymore. So for me, I don't take melatonin. I don't do any of the sleep aids or anything like that to reset. So I try and go all natural, but I had a plan. I got there with, oh gosh, it was probably 6 days maybe ahead of time.
That's good.
We stayed initially in a place that was kind of quiet. I had soft surface running nearby that I could do, and we just relaxed for a while. Some people don't have the ability to do that because of work or whatever. That's fine.
Mm.
But for me, the best thing was getting there early. It took probably 3 or 4 days to actually acclimate to the 9 hour time difference from Arizona to Berlin. And a lot of what that looked like was just no matter when you get in, when you go to bed, always wake up with the sun, go outside, open your
Mm.
eyes, get some low level sunlight in your eyes, like all the Andrew Huberman bro fans will know. And just get that light in your eyes early in the morning, kind of resets your clock, eat at the proper times, you normally would during the day, and just start living that time immediately when you get there. And for me, a lot of that means I go out for a run to get some light in my eyes at the right time, and then I force myself to lay in bed, close my eyes, put on an eye mask, listen to, do a meditation, do whatever I can to try and rest. And unfortunately, that meant I was like awake at like in the middle of the night a lot of times. But after 3 days, I was acclimated and ready to go.
Yeah, yeah, that's important. Anytime I kind of travel that type of distance, yeah, it's always I got to get there 4 or 5 days at a minimum there just to be able to adjust exactly what you were saying. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, we didn't talk about this, but when you get there, I mean, do you map out the course? Do you drive the course or I mean, what do you do to get an idea of what the course is like?
So another thing people can do at home, great tip. When you know a course, just geomap it. Go online and start. You can even go into Google Maps and you can just follow along the route. You can see what the roads look like. If you have a point where you want to like meet someone or someone needs to take public transit to get there and meet you to drop you a bottle or whatever, you can do all that stuff online. So that's lovely.
Mm.
Including like most races have a race video where I go into YouTube and always search if it's a major race, there's going to be a video where you can watch it. I think I watched the Berlin course video on the treadmill probably like 5 to 10 times just in my house before the race. So really understanding like for Berlin, it was really simple. It's pancake flat. You just run as hard as you can for 26.2 miles. But for something like CIM, um, I'm I've run it before, so that's a great little intro. But they also have a video, so you can remind yourself like, okay, it's rolling hills through these miles. What's how many turns are there? What's the
Yeah,
topography like? Is it going to be really sunny? Is it going to be shady? You can kind of infer all of these things from just gathering information online, and then write out your race plan in your journal, and then day of I like to sit down the night before, like maybe the morning of the day before your race, because usually you're sitting on your ass trying to not do anything anyway.
yeah.
So I use that time just to sit down, like write down my race plan on my computer, and then translate that into with a Sharpie onto my arm or my hand so that I have it for the next day.
Yeah, all of the above for me. Usually though, that like the day of the day before, probably sort of 2 days before the race, we'll kind of get in the car and we'll drive the bike, just to get an idea of what it's like, the bike course. Because a lot of times I don't know what the road conditions are and whatnot, and I always like to see that. So
Yeah.
I'll do a little bit of that. Then you also said after, like the day before the race, I've made this mistake before. I think I went on sort of a semi vacation, and I was doing some vacationing before I did the Ironman. And the day before, you're supposed to be off your feet. You're supposed to be hydrating, and I probably was walking around a little bit more than what I sort of should have been doing. So I think it's important to make sure you're resting, especially when you're going to be out there for I don't know, anywhere from 9 to maybe 16 hours, whatever. It's
Yeah.
important to rest your feet.
Yep. This one goes out to all those married couples. If you bring your wife or your husband with you and they are not participating in the activity, set proper expectations beforehand. This is
Mm,
why we're going. My goal is to do this thing in this race. And then afterward, we planned a little getaway afterward where we could just relax and have fun.
nice.
And after I said, I'm literally just going to put my hands up. You can do whatever you want. We can do whatever we want after this race, but like, let me get this out of the way. Let me do the thing I've been working toward for the last like 6 months. And, hopefully your partner will respect that. I'm fortunate enough to to have someone who doesn't fight me too hard on it anymore.
Did you let her know that you might have everything that you wanted to do afterwards? It might have happened a little bit slower. If
Yeah.
I remember a
Yeah.
couple of videos, you weren't walking normal. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna say,
Just avoid, yeah, we can do whatever we want after the race. We'll just avoid stairs and steep hills.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, and so like the last topic, so we talked about nutrition and training prep in terms of nutrition, a little bit of logistics and planning. Now, I think the mental component of racing is really important. Not just pre-race mental prep, which is also, that's pretty key. And there's a lot of people putting time and effort into like sports. What do they call it? Like not sports therapy, but like mental health practices when it
Well-being.
comes to sport, training your mind, but also during the race. So Tony, do you have any tips for people who are going into a long endurance event? Because a full Ironman is really freaking long.
Mhm.
Uh, any tips? Anything you'd share?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, I mean, there's a lot of things, but the first thing is just kind of realizing it is long, and you are going to have mind changes throughout the entire race. You're going to be super stoked for a good part. You're going to be like, oh, I don't, what's going on? So why am I doing this? You might be kind of even keel. You're going to get to a point where you're sort of frustrated. You might get angry and what have you. You might start getting some negative thoughts. So just knowing that those things are going to occur, you're not always going to be in a positive mindset. What are the actual tools that you can bring out to be able to thwart those things off so you can get yourself back to a positive mindset? A lot of times for me, when I start getting negative, it's a quick, good indication that my hydration or my fueling's off. I gotta I gotta suck another gel down. I gotta do
You
something.
get hangry.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I don't want to have a Snickers. But
Snickers might
yeah,
be a
so just
great fuel, to be honest. I mean, it's
true,
got
true.
like a healthy amount of fats, lots of sugars, goes right down.
Yeah, I just couldn't take it, man. My stomach would go nuts with that thing. But I think the other thing that's important to know, right? So just kind of, one is knowing that there's going to be ups and downs, and just make sure that you understand and you're, prepared to deal with those ups and downs to make sure you can bring yourself back to a positive mindset. But I think the other thing is when you're going in, setting expectations, I think is important. And I think I kind of learned my last lesson, with this last race. This really hit home for me. Most of the races that I've done in the past, I was like, "Hey, I'm just going out there. I'm, doing an Ironman. This is awesome." And I knew when I'm out there on the course, I'm a talker. So I'm on the bike. I'm talking to people on the bike, and I'm on the run. I'm encouraging everyone to run, and we're just kind of going through this, and we're finishing it together. I'm an Ironman, awesome. And then I kind of, this time around, I was trying to get a little bit more sort of serious, and I had a goal in mind, I had a time in mind, and that my mindset was, I got to get this time. So when I started out, I think I I should have realized that, hey, this is the time that I want, but knowing that stuff's going to happen in a 12, for me, for a 12-hour span, things
Yeah.
are going to happen. They're not always going to go well. And here in this case, it was the winds. Some of the roads weren't in great conditions. I kind of fell off the bike one time. And so all those things, make sure I can address those things, make sure I realize those things can happen. How will I adjust? How will I deal with that? And I think I didn't necessarily do that. I just saw flat course, fast swim equals PR. This is going to be great. I'm going to be holding my hands up high. I'm like, oh my gosh, my time is amazing. I didn't take into consideration all of that other stuff that could go wrong. So I think
Yeah.
that'd be some of my advice.
And yeah, I think that's one of the biggest components. And something I tell people that I coach, runners that I coach, most often is to set proper expectations to yourself prior to a race. But then also sometimes those expectations are to have no expectations and
Mm.
make sure you're going into things with an open mind, which almost always is the best way to go about it, unless you're going for a really specific personal best. And this is like, you're really tracking your training well and you know what that time is, the course, you've done it recently, and you're probably for more of those advanced athletes. But for most people, going in and having an open mind about what could happen in the race, how you're
Mm.
going to adjust, and having that contingency plan of if this happens, this is what I'm going to pivot to, kind of sets your mind at ease and allows you to execute on your plan, execute on the pacing and whatever. And if something goes wrong, you've got a plan for that too.
Yeah, it's going to deal with it. And I hate to use the analogy because everybody does, but it's just like life, right? I mean, it's life is going to throw a lot of kind of curveballs at you, and in your races, there's a lot of kind of curveballs that are going to come at you too, and it's just really how you're going to be able to deal and handle
Yeah.
those. I usually, and I tell my athletes whatever the same thing. I have a few different goals. What's your first goal? What's your second goal? What's your third goal? Right. So it's like first and foremost, for me, I want to finish. Right. So I want to finish. I want to have fun. And then usually that sort of third one, is a time or something like that. And, I want to be there to help others, what have you. But those are usually the three. So I didn't make my time. I kind of sort of had some fun, but I finished, so that was the important thing. So at least I got one of the three
Yeah.
goals.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if I'm being like, a bad student on my end and not listening to some of my own advice, my goals were A goal was under 227, B goal was under 230, and C goal
Mm,
was finish the race. And
finish race. See?
every
Yeah.
time I say seagull, I always want to put one of those seagull bird emojis up. But
Yeah.
that C goal is really important. Of finish finish the race should always be your final goal, and having that as like your final contingency plan, I think is the most important one because it'll kind of get you through whatever happens. In Boston 2023, I I mean, I was worried about shitting my pants from like I think it was mile 10,
Mm,
and 26 miles in the race is, I mean, that's a really long time to be worried about shitting your pants in front of like hundreds of thousands of people. And I had to stop 6 times. Like once I realized, you slowly start going through the scenarios in your head and you go, okay, I have to put my hands up and just
yeah.
let things happen, do the best I can. And ultimately, if I didn't have the mindset of like, I'm finishing this thing, mostly because I wanted to be able to wear the jacket without like
Yeah.
looking like a goofball.
Yeah.
Um, if you have that as your final plan, I would have walked across. Um, so
Right.
something else to consider.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. We didn't really talk much about like when you talk about the mindset also around during your training, right? I mean, starting to visualize while you're sort of like training. I know, throughout my like training ramp, I'll also do race simulations and what have you to get an idea of what that type of intensity is going to be and how I'm going to feel at those times. I think that's equally as important is to make sure you're sort of simulating race pace for a certain amount of time. I know for me, probably towards the maybe the last month or so before like leading up to my race. I mean, I am doing, on one of the long sort of Saturdays and Sundays, I'm doing a race pace for, like 5.5 hours, on the bike, just to see how I feel instead of,
Yeah,
maybe 40 minutes off the bike at that sort of race pace. And I think you know, that's important as well to get that mindset of how's your body going to feel, when you're going at that intensity.
that's a great point. And yeah, so like mindset relative to what you're actually doing in training, I think is huge. Yeah, that's an awesome point, Tony. One thing I've been trying to do to improve that, improve my I guess resilience, if you'd call it, like my mental resilience during a race, is by doing a lot more of those like long tempos, kind of like what you're talking about on the bike. But for me, it's I've always been bad at doing a really really long threshold run or like marathon threshold or hour race pace threshold. Um, it's really challenging for me because most of the time I'm alone,
Mm.
and it takes a lot more mental energy when you don't have someone on a bike pacing you, you don't have a training partner pacing you. So I've been trying to work with more training partners, which lucky for me, I live in Flagstaff, so that is it's a lot easier here than some other places. But if you can get with a crew who can help you get through some of those longer sessions, and go out for a 10-mile threshold run, or go out for what I did prior to Berlin was like a 15-mile threshold, and having someone on the bike there, I had a training partner with me. That
Mhm.
was huge, not just a confidence booster, but also I went out there and uh, best advice I got was I was with Ryan Hall and Sarah Hall, and Ryan, he's on the bike when we're warming up, and I was saying, oh well, kind of nervously, I'm not quite sure what pace I should be running, but like I'll go out there and see what it feels like. And he goes, well, best not to think about it then. And I think that's the best advice anyone has ever given me. Anytime there's a worry in your mind, all those little things that pop up that are going to hold you back, because those are the doubts that are going to pop up when you're running as well, or when you're
Yeah.
on your bike or in your triathlon. um, it's gonna be nagging in the back of your head and say, I don't know if I can do this. Maybe this is a little too fast. Maybe I should slow down. Maybe I should adjust here. Best not to think about it, because you'll feel the effort. You'll kind of settle into an effort and
Mhm.
just go with it. And I think that's huge for mental resiliency.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think one of the things I'm just kind of listening to you, and I'm going back to what we have, sort of said there, throughout the podcast. I do think there was something I kind of missed, and it was, one of the like lessons I've learned. I didn't have a lot of time to just kind of get out on the bike, like, and actually ride outside on the roads. I really don't have a lot of people to train with kind of here either. I don't have like sort of a group, so it's just so convenient. I go out to my deck and I'm on my Wahoo trainer, with my Zwift, and I did most of my long sort of trainings there, and I kind of saw what I was capable of doing and the times and the intensities. But that's really not the same as actually kind of
Yeah.
being out there and dealing with the weather and the conditions and what have you. So just always keep that in mind as well. When you're going out there, that hey, if you're on the treadmill or if you're, on a trainer, that it might not always kind of be
Yeah.
the same. Your results might not sort of can translate 100% when you're actually on the course itself.
I also, yeah, same thing, in the opposite direction. Most of my long runs were happening, like, I live in Arizona. Even though I'm up at altitude, it's pretty darn hot during the summer, and
Yeah.
especially where I live, there's not a lot of shade. So most of my long runs I would do as early as I could, but I'd be finishing a 2.5 hour long run where I'm doing a lot of that, like most of it at up tempo to marathon or threshold pace. And I'd be finishing those. It's 85 degrees. It's hot,
Mhm.
85, 90 degrees by like 9 o'clock in the morning. And that will slow you down. I live at 7,000 feet. That slows you down. So I think um, a lot of those things that make you tougher in training, like getting through them, even though your session's not there, technically by the numbers,
Yeah.
what's your effort like? How are
Yeah.
you how are you feeling what that effort should be during the training, so that you're not going too hard and you're not burning out, and that 90 degrees is going to get to you and you completely
Yeah.
crash. Or um, in the other direction, where you're just kind of moderating and you don't want to be going too easy either. So really knowing, like, what do those efforts feel like, and I feel like most of that is a mental skill.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it is in your head, and like the mind body connection, and that's one of the biggest things. I've even had some athletes that I've coached where we just take a complete step back from focusing on like doing this type of workout at this time in training, and I say, okay, we're going to spend like a month, and I'm just going to give you effort based training. I'm going to say, go out, do this. It's a fartlek. You're going to just do a minute on, a minute off, 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off, 1 minute. But it's just a mishmash of different efforts, and I want you to moderate what those efforts are, and we'll look at the paces later on and see how you execute it on the workout. And most people kind of over time, when they're thinking about it, and that's the goal of the training, they'll build that skill. But you need to like actively build the skill.
Yeah. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah. And so like during your race, so we talked about before training, during your race, there is it can be huge having a mantra or like something that you can repeat yourself, tell yourself, during the run. Do you have a mantra, Tony?
Oftentimes I don't have a mantra. I think, when I first started out, for me to keep going more, more on the run, I used to play mind games. I'd be like, oh, I can't stop running. Something's happening with my family, and I need to continue to run to be able to save them. And some, some weird
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, I'd be like, I can't stop. I can't stop. I have to do this. I have to get to this point A or point B to be able to save someone. A lot of times that's my mindset. But you know what though? I mean, I'm a Marine, I'm a jarhead, right? So I kind of grew up, I went through that training of, you get to a point when it's funny, you actually told one of your athletes that, it's very sort of similar. You get into, you refer to it as zombie mode, where you just like space out. And I think a lot of the elite, like military folks, Navy SEALs, what have you, you get to a point like you're going through so much pain and so much agony, that I don't know, you kind of tune out in a way. I mean, you're still like vigilant, you still know exactly what's going on, you got situational awareness, but you tune out, man, and you just go. And I think that I just have that ability to be able to do that. I've learned that over time, and that's kind of my little thing there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first one, we'll call that the first mindset, we'll call that John Wick mindset
Yeah,
because, someone kills his puppy and then he's out for blood. So,
there you go, there you go.
uh,
Yep.
but the other one I think is huge, like learning how to, like you said, just disconnect and settle in. I
Yes,
also
yeah.
like just saying settle in. You just settle into the effort and let your body do the work. And if you're on the bike, it's like your legs are just spinning and you're just spinning your legs, zoning out, eyes forward. Same thing with running. You just kind of get into a groove. And another thing actually that Ryan told me as well, which was amazing advice. I think about it all the time. Was to just thinking about being efficient and conserving as much
Mm,
energy as possible. So the only thing you need to think about that is like tight and stressful is that impact on the ground. So your foot comes around, your foot impacts the ground. There's that split second where you push off and you kick your leg back. And then from that, like 270 degrees all the way back around, your leg is completely just focusing on being relaxed. So relax all the muscles. So it's kind of, there are also
mm,
meditations where you go and you tense muscles on purpose and then you let them go. And then you tense them on purpose and you let them go. And I think
mm,
focusing on relaxing your body,
mm.
and whatever mantras you tell yourself to do that, really just increases that mind body connection, helps you be totally relaxed, and helps you settle into that effort. And if I may, my mantra from Berlin is my favorite so far that I've been able to use was pain is temporary, but quitting is forever. And
Yeah.
the only thing I could think about that whole race was, did I seriously come this whole way? I flew, I took 2 weeks off work. My kids are staying with my parents. My wife and I paid all this money to go to Berlin and spent all this time focusing on this goal. I made videos and stuff on YouTube talking about it. Like, am I really, am I really gonna cut a corner right now when in the back of my head my mind's like, yeah, just slow down a little, it's fine, you'll be all right, you'll still have this time or whatever, make a concession, but just don't negotiate with yourself and just focus on what you went there to do.
Mm.
And it's huge. That got me through. Pain is temporary, quitting is forever. I went through a lot of pain toward the end of the race, and that's what got me through. Credit to David Goggins.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to feel pain no matter what. You're either going to feel the pain up front while you're going through and you're pushing your pace, or you're going to feel the pain afterwards when you realize you didn't reach your goal. So
Absolutely.
either you're going to get it before or you're going to get it after. Pain is always going to be there. It's just up to you. You make the choice. Do you want it kind of during or do you want it after? That's
Yeah.
the other thing I
And
wanted to mention is
well, Tony, let me caveat that. when we say pain, also we are not talking about, oh my god, I just tore my Achilles pain, or
Yeah, yeah.
my my hip is, I'm in agony because my pelvis has dislocated and my leg is not functioning properly. That's like, injury pain is a completely different thing, and I think that part of the mind body connection is understanding what is injury pain, what is race pain, and
Oh
muscle
man.
fatigue
You
as
just,
well.
that's exactly what I was going to transition to. That was kind of perfect. Yeah, it's one thing that I learned what pain is, that I can deal with. I know my body can continue to push, and it's not going to really affect me long term. It's not a major injury. I think, you need to also understand, what your body is telling you, certain messages, because a lot of times I think I've learned that your body's going to have pain, but your body will continue to go for a long period of time after that, pain, without actually resulting in a lot of injury. It's just a matter of you finding out. I guess, you're saying the mind body connection. Where is that like level of pain that your body's saying, "Hey, I'm good. I can continue to push," as opposed to, "Oh, I better sort of slow down or do something, or else there's going to be a major injury."
And just like that, we circled back to our first topic, which is practice what you plan to execute on race day in your regular everyday training, mental, physical, nutrition, all that stuff. I feel like you just kind of set yourself up for success when you're really thinking through why you're doing what you're doing, when you're doing it, and making sure that your mindset is right for the race.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, great. All right. Well, I got to go make dinner. Thank you, Tony, for joining again. It's always a pleasure. And thanks everyone for listening. Happy running.
All right, thanks. See y'all later.